Happy New Year's Eve, everybody. It's been a little bit since I've been online. My mother had hip surgery, which was successful, but I had to go and, well, I didn't have to, but I went to take care of her through her surgery for a bit, and then it was the busyness of the holidays. And now we're entering a new year, and I'm excited. Tonight I get to go to a gong uh, presentation by my friend Faye Henry here, and it's in a geodesic dome. And so I'm going with several people tonight to do that. And then tomorrow I have a friend who has an open house out in the country. And so I made a big batch of potato salad to take along and usher in the new year. And my friend whose open house I'm going to tomorrow sent a text, and it was sort of like there's going to be a bonfire and some stew and people sort of, just sharing good fellowship. And she said, think about sort of what your takeaway was from this past year. If you had sort of a teaching that came to you, and then sort of what is your theme for the coming year. And I thought, that was... I'm not somebody to necessarily make resolutions and things, and this isn't really a resolution, but I thought that was an interesting thing to think about. And so I just wanted to share that for me, I feel like towards the end of the year, coming up with this idea or encountering this idea of the reality tunnel was really helpful, because that plus the Friston free energy principle and the idea that we are really creative beings and that we're constantly living inside a story that we sort of participate in making in our heads, and we incorporate new information in, or we disregard information to keep our story coherent and consistent. And it just helped me have a lot more compassion, both for myself and for others, in recognizing the power of story and these models, and that they do present real challenges in communication when you're trying to be in community with people and you don't actually have much overlap in your world models. And so to me, that I found really helpful. So that was sort of my takeaway for the year. And then in thinking about the new year, we had tons and tons of rain last week, about like 3 inches of rain. But fortunately, my basement stayed dry, so I'm super happy about that. And my roof held, my new roof was good. So those are all good things. But at the end of the last day of big rain, I thought, I should go and do some quartz crystal mining, which is something that people do here. I hadn't done it before. And I thought, well, if there's been a lot of rain, it would sort of be eroded. And the way it works, there's actually, Arkansas has one of the most important quartz crystal deposits in the world, second only to a place in Brazil, I think. And back in World War II, it was used commercially for oscillators for crystal radios. But actually, I spoke to Joseph yesterday, I think it was, and he was saying that actually quartz is still used in modern day computers as the oscillation of the timekeeping, the internal timekeeper of these different technological devices that we have. So it's kind of like the heartbeat of the technology, which is super interesting, because a lot of what we've been sort of bouncing around lately has been around consciousness and coherence, and sort of the heart field being part of this maintaining coherence in the quantum field. So to think about the quartz as a heartbeat is kind of cool. And so I have sort of mixed feelings about it. There's a place called the Jim Coleman Mine, and they have a huge, giant piece of like 8-ton quartz that's in like one of the feature things at the Smithsonian. But it's an open pit mine, really. And theirs is not the only one, but this is one that a lot of tourists go to. And so what they do is they undertake their mining activities, and thinking of John Trudell, like, right, mining the being part of human. And then when they take off probably the big saleable pieces, either for commercial use or tourist use, or selling to people that use crystals for various purposes, then they drop dump trucks full of the leftover dirt. And for a $20 fee, you can pay, well, if you're a certain age, you can pay $20. I think I got a $5 discount for being over 55. And you can spend the day from like 8 to 4:30 digging in the dirt to see what you can find. And Yeah, so I wasn't exactly sure what to expect. And so most of the stuff in the tailings is really broken bits. And so it has kind of a weird energy to that because it feels a little violent in terms of these, like the crystals as having their own animus being, and then like these piles and piles of dirt that were used to be in the ground and these crystals. But I did it anyway, and I might do it again. But again, I'm not sure exactly how I feel about it. But I'll show you. You might not be able to see it, but you see the white line, and it's actually kind of glittery in there, and that's the quartz. And so the mountains around Hot Springs are called the Washita Range, and they run east-west, and they were created like the Washita orogeny back when what is now South America crashed into North America and pushed up these hills, which are now very old. They were bigger mountains, I guess, and now they're lower mountains. And then some of the cracks filled in with the silica, like super hot silica water, ocean water, and smushed into the cracks, and then underwent sort of a chemical process and crystallized. And which is super interesting. So you can kind of imagine that this is a crack that the water goes up into, and think about like water and water memory, and then this crystalline substance is in there. And there's actually two kinds of presentations of quartz. One is milky quartz, which is more opaque, and then the other is clear quartz. And so this is an example of a broken off piece of the milky quartz, and they say that it's because of bubbles in it that makes it opaque. And then here, and you can see the angularity of the crystalline structure. You can kind of see the angular part, and then this is sort of the broken off part, which is more uneven. And then this is the clear. Look how amazing that is. It's super, super clear. And so that's the linear crystallized pointy bit, and then the broken off bit. And so often what you'll see in the tailings is there's, I think it's like sandstone and shale and chert. And so there's a stone piece. Often it's orange because there's a lot of clay. And then on top of that, there'll be a layer of milky quartz, either white or sort of creamy colored. And then growing out of that, which is often called the matrix, then you'll get the clear quartz points. And you can't, even though there are some really big boulders there with a layer of maybe 2 or 3 inches of quartz crystal, you're not supposed to hit it with hammers or anything because it can fly off like glass and hurt people. So you really, unless you're equipped to bring a giant boulder down, you just have to look and sort of see how it presents. But so the milky quartz is sort of the matrix from which the clear quartz crystals grow. And so when I was looking at a blog, there's a woman named Jen who has a whole blog about crystals of Arkansas. And she talked about that the milky quartz has yin energy and the clear quartz has yang energy. So the milky is the feminine energy, and then the clear is the masculine energy. And sort of thinking about both electromagnetism and sort of Eastern medicine aspects of like polarity and the charge, and just reflecting on the year. So I actually, it's out in the car because I'm going to take it with me to the gong thing. But one of the first pieces of crystal that I found, it was quite amazing. It's like the size of my palm. It's big and it's heavy. The quartz is heavy. It feels heavier than a non-crystal stone of a similar size. And and you can't really describe it until you actually see it for yourself. But a lot of it was in loose orange soil, and the rain had eroded things down. And I wasn't good at the digging, because when you dig, it's just rocks and they're all covered in orange and you can't tell anything from anything, and nothing looks particularly interesting. And so what I ended up doing is these big, big rock piles, I had a bucket and had a little trowel, and I would just look, and it was mostly overcast, but occasionally the sun would come out and you could see the glint, especially of the clear quartz in showing. And so there was a section where it was a glint and you could see a reflection, but behind the crystal, it was dark. It was like a smoky dark color. And there are smoky quartz, which I think have maybe a radioactive element to them, natural smoky quartz. But this is actually just how the light refracts, that it refracts darkness in the earth. And then you take it out, and it looks just like, again, the milky or the clear. The darkness isn't there, but in the earth, it actually is reflecting this depth of darkness, which it's hard to describe, but it was very compelling to me. And so I was poking around, and then this big piece came out, again, big for me, like the size of my palm, and it turns out it was a big piece of milky quartz, sort of a point that had broken off. And of all of the pieces that I collected that day, which, was like a pail full about this deep, this is the one that felt like it had like almost like a being or a story to it. Like this was for me. Like this quartz crystal, this woman Jen talks about like the crystals that are meant for you. And this felt like it was meant for me. And at the time I hadn't looked up the sort of the yin yang element. And when it's called oxalic acid that you use, which you dilute it, and it clears off the orange, the rusty stains off of the crystals. And so I soaked them for 3 days, like they said, in the acid, and then I took it out last night, and I was laying them all out, and I was a little disappointed that this big crystal that was the palm of my hand was actually milky, because somehow it's funny, like I really like the clear, but you need both, right? The matrix and then the point, like they're the holding and the embedment of the yin energy of the feminine, and then the pointy bit of the masculine and the yang. That's just, they need each other. And so I was like, oh, okay, it's not clear, which it would have been cooler if it was clear. And then so I got to thinking about this and setting an intention for the new year, and the fact that this coming year feels a lot like maybe this is a message to lean into yin energy, which is receptive, shall we say, and expansive, and it's more like cool and the moon and inner knowing. And I feel like this past year I've had to step up and do a lot of things that I wouldn't have done if my life hadn't gotten turned upside down. So it was kind of a yang year. It's like drive that U-Haul 3 times, sell your family house, clear everything out, get a new place, and I stepped up and I got all of these things done. And I'm proud of myself for doing that. But now I'm situated and I have a cozy little house, and I've been planting a beautiful garden. I planted another 450 little bulbs yesterday, supposedly deer-resistant bulbs, under my crepe myrtle hedge that I had cleared out. And so it's a nurturing thing. And I don't know if I officially lost them or I mislaid the people that I used to love and nurture in my life, my ex-husband and my child, and I'm building bridges back with my mother, but sometimes it's more or less successful. And so I have all of this going on. And so I'm thinking like maybe this yin energy of like, what do I nurture? I can nurture this place, this little 1/4 acre I can nurture and plant plants, and I can nurture the birds and put a bird bath out, and I can nurture new friendships. I feel very, very blessed that the people I've encountered here are warm. They're generous with their time, with their connections. There's not a stinginess. There's definitely an abundance feeling here. And everybody hugs everybody. And, people play games and people have potlucks. And it's kind of old school. And I am so blessed. I feel like I'm just very, very grateful for having this. So nurturing those new relationships, right? But being open to what arrives, and then being able to sort of hold that space internally for what may be coming, and not to have to project myself in these strong ways the way I've done, before my life fell apart in terms of my presence online and making videos and different things and sort of projecting outwards. And then stepping up to rebuild my life in this new way. But yeah, so not forever, and then that's not to say I'm never going to make another video or anything like that. But I just feel like maybe this expedition into this tailings of this crystal thing after the rain was a way of saying, like, try out this for the year and see how this works. See if you get some, get in touch with your body, get in touch with your interior state. There's a woman who's teaching a class that's about sort of like heart-based healing. And the more and more I look into the quantum field. I've been looking at this, reading this book. I'm almost done. Not quite. A lot of that's footnotes. The Heinrich Paz book that Michaela Uluru recommended to John Rogers, and Sean had recommended it. And essentially it's about this idea of monism, and that everything is one, and sort of the relationship of that to quantum physics and the Copenhagen interpretation and the Christian church and Eastern, practices, and it's quite fascinating, and it overlaps a lot with the work that Joseph's been doing on consciousness and quantum realism. So I'm dealing a lot more in abstraction. I know a lot of people are still really focused on geopolitics, different things, but at this point I'm really in sort of another headspace. And so within the monism and the oneness, and I just want to show you this. This was a piece of art that my kid made me in 2009 for my birthday. And if you see these two things next to each other, I don't know, maybe they're both artifacts, but this crystal in the crack, and then on the one side, it's a little wooden plaque like the kind you get at a craft store, and it's painted, and on either side of this rectangle is a stone wall, and at the base of one of the stone walls is a heart right there, this little pink heart, and in the upper corner is a radiating sun, which is kind of like the one, right? The circle from which the potential arises. And then there's a vine with pink leaves or flowers growing up. I don't think it's cat briars. I don't see the prickers on there, but it's like there's constraints. There's these enabling constraints. And then within that space, what do you do with that? And so between the quartz crystal and this picture, and then on the side, there's like silver rickrack. And you think about your connection to your astral body and your soul, to your physical body, and the silver thread. So I feel like there's this, and it's a wave form, right? It's rickrack, zigzag, rickrack. And so I think sometimes they say, I don't know what time is. I don't know if it's linear. To me, this felt like a message from my kid, 15 years ago, for a time that I need it right now. And so I think that's quite beautiful. And the other thing about the quartz is, about a year ago, I did the first chapter from this book, The Silver Crown, by Robert C. O'Brien. And it's a vintage book from the 70s, maybe. And he also wrote the Mrs. Frisbee and the Rats of NIMH. And someone had recommended it. So I started the first chapter, maybe 2 chapters. I did one reading, and then things got really difficult, like with breaking the house down and selling it and moving. And so I just stopped. And actually the first chapter, and I'm going to start again from the beginning, because if you listened to it a year ago and I never finished it, you're going to need a refresher. But it's quite traumatic. There's a traumatic breaking of the little girl who's the main character from her family. But when I read it through, and this was around the time that Jason and I were doing that travel through Arkansas and finding out about the quartz crystals, that there is a whole section in here towards the end about quartz crystals, and then at the end also tuning. And so synchronistically, a couple nights ago, I guess I was looking for something to watch. I don't normally watch TV other than YouTube videos, but I have a small group of things I bought on Amazon, and I was looking. I would highly recommend this stop motion animated film called Kubo and the Two Strings, which is a children's movie technically, but very deeper themes. And if you think about acoustics and resonance and consciousness, there's a lot to it, because this little boy plays an instrument that then turns paper into these origami storytelling things. In terms of like quantum acoustics, it's entanglement and ancestors. It's super fascinating. So I was poking around, and maybe I was looking for that. But what I noticed was there was a movie that evidently I bought, and I'm sure someone had recommended it to me a while ago, but I never watched it. And this is like one of these stories. Like, of course you didn't watch it because you weren't ready to watch it till now. And it's called The Dark City. And this is an adult film. It's not exactly horror, but it's kind of lightly scary. And it was from 1998. And it was essentially a very similar storyline to The Matrix, but it predated it by 1 year. And it was about memories and sleep and the soul and individuation, and it involved aspects of time and tuning, which again, resonance and the quartz and these resonant things. And, you know, I think that was quite useful. So I'm just thinking because in this book, The Silver Crown, maybe they got some ideas. There's an aspect of tuning, and that there are a few people that can't be tuned. And then what happens when those people can't be tuned? And in this book, the little girl couldn't be tuned. So in the tuning, I think has to do with also your frequency and your heart frequency. And so I continue to feel like, especially with my beloved family, that there are times in which my frequency is like a jammer to them, or like that thing you plug in the kitchen to keep the mice out. And I don't mean it. It's nothing I'm saying. It's simply like my resonance on them is out of tune, is dissonant. And there are aspects of what Joseph is working on around consciousness and quantum realism that does have to do with this heart coherence. And so if you think about, again, the Heart Math Institute, heart entrainment, you're going to, like, you know, I just got another email about empowered hearts and heart meditation. Even this class I'm taking is sort of, I don't know that it's specifically heart-based, but like, there's a lot about the heart. And again, I emailed this guy, Richard Watson, who's working with Mike 11, and he's looking into this idea of life as a song. And it sounds a lot like what Joseph's talking about in terms of quantum realism and the field and acoustic and waveforms. And one of the things Richard Watson mentioned is he's just theorizing, but they're interesting ideas. The idea that our lineage is actually a long song, and that we're an instance, we're a section of a song, of a longer song. And I felt for a while that sort of there's something about my family lineage that maybe got broken or dissonant or out of tune. And by being the good girl, I thought I could fix it, or following all the rules in the system. And that didn't happen. And that, like, just something jumped up late in life and bit me in the butt and said, psych, this whole pattern is just reoccurring and there's nothing you can do to stop it. And so I'm trying to understand the system better to figure out how I do this. But the heart frequency is part of it. And then someone sent me this lovely little book. It's called All Creation Waits, The Advent Mystery of New Beginnings by Gail Boss. So thank you for sending this for the holidays. And every story is like a little 2-page story of an animal in hibernation. And, you know, I feel a little bit like the yin stuff it's not exactly hibernation, but it's pulling inward, right? Pulling your energy inward. And so part of the hibernation piece is dropping your heart rate and dropping your metabolism and your breath, and sort of going into this sort of in-between state, which seems like this state of meditation or mindfulness or inwardness that links you with the monism that they talk about, like the quantum consciousness. And this circle also remind me, Joseph has a post about the circle of values, and like the oscillating circle of the universe, and this recursion and how it learns and how we're individuated parts of it. And then, you know, again, conjecturing that after death, like, and it goes along with what Bentov is saying, like all the information we organize goes back into the whole, and it's this beautiful fluid cycle. And so part of when I got back from my mom's surgery, I had a friend here who has about 10 acres on the other side of town, including a stretch that had been, it backs up to the park here, and they had done a prescribed burn a few years ago. And so there are a lot of new baby pine trees springing up. And she said, oh, come, and you can get some pine boughs and make a wreath. I'd walked on her property before, and she said, I asked if I could get some greens to make a wreath, because that was part of my history is, I used to work at Bartram's Garden, and we had 2 big events a year, our spring plant sale and the holiday green sale. And I would decorate wreaths sometimes with the holiday green sale. And I learned how to do that with the Pennsylvania Horticultural Society. They would, during the holidays for their volunteers, as a thank you, they would do a wreath workshop. So it was really fun. Like, and it's essentially you have a wire frame and then this little florist wire, and you wire on the bundles. And so I was able to get the white pine, which is part of these Bartram wreaths, but also down the way, it was a house site that was no longer occupied. It was sort of an abandoned house. And in the yard was a magnolia with beautiful pods, and a holly with berries, and a boxwood, which we always had boxwood too. And so I incorporated all of those, but I really wanted some cedar, and there wasn't any cedar until I got here to Marigold Circle, and there's a little slice of land that goes into the park that's kind of a no man's land, and there was a cedar right there. So I got some cedar and then some swirly curly grasses, and I'll put a picture of that in tomorrow when I edit this. But yeah, so this idea of the wreath and evergreen and cycling and the potential of the middle and what comes out from the middle is quite something. And but in this book, this guy Hans-Dieter Zeh, Z-E-H, he was a physicist, and he was conjecturing, there was always the question of how do you fit the quantum and the classical, right? And because the rules of the quantum universe are not the same as the rule of the classic, and how do you join the two? And what Zeh said is actually it resonates, so to speak, with the Hugh Everett III's ideas. But what he was saying is that we actually live in a quantum universe, but our senses can't perceive it. And so we live in bubbles within this quantum universe where the classical rules apply. And that we're kept in this bubble by our senses, and probably in our heartbeat that brings us down from the cosmic divine, which is infinite and omnipresent and all-knowing but timeless, right? And us as human people in whatever this is that we're in, that we see, linearity, right? That this thing came from 2009, supposedly, but it's just totally appropriate to right now. Or the time is measured in a quartz crystal in a rock, or behind me is an amaryllis. I've been on amaryllis time this past month and watching the amaryllis bulb grow. So time is dependent on the observer, but we have these senses. And I've been going once a month. There's a community group that has a kirtan, which is to singing yoga. And it's really fun to sing these mantras. And the woman who runs it, she does a really nice job of introducing what the words mean and where they come from, a little context. And one of them, she talked about the Bhagavad Gita, and a story where Arjuna, who was the main character, I guess, was in a chariot with 5 crazy horses all going in different directions, and Krishna was in the back. And this idea of Krishna consciousness, and Krishna evidently was a cowherder and played the flute, so kind of like Pan or Hermes, right? The acoustics, the waveforms, the silver thread, and that the 5 horses were like our senses and our ego, and then the more we try to control through our sensing, the more unruly everything gets. And we can imagine what that's like in terms of real reality and social media reality. And now, but if we let sort of our access the consciousness, the larger cosmic consciousness, then things go with the flow. They go more easily. And she mentioned the idea of us being instruments of the divine, right? The divine force, however you understand God. And Krishna's thing is the flute, right? And the Pan flute and the Hermes flute and different flutes. And which is wonderful because someone else sent me a box with some triangles, musical triangles, which is about the level of my musical playing ability. So that's awesome. And then this beautiful clay flute. You can see the holes. And then look, on the other side is a vase. It's pretty amazing. So this is like where life goes with ease. And that's what I'm trying to work on with the yin energy is, I don't know, in the Jamie Wheel book, Stealing Fire, they talked about stir. And it's like selflessness, timelessness, S-T-E. E is effortlessness, and R is richness. And even though I'm not sure what to make of that Stealing Fire, I'm not sure I co-sign all the things in it, I do think that as an idea that flow and stir is pretty cool. And so I would just invite us to consider the complementary energies of yin and yang and the quartz and the resonance, because as we're here in our crazy chariots, the world is very dramatic, and it is because there's polarity, right? And the extent to which we can maybe embrace the dramatic, but not be overwhelmed by it, and then find the richness in life, and count your blessings. And for me, I unpacked all of I like ceramic pots more than plastic, but you don't want to leave them out all winter. Although here it's been really warm until now, and I have to say winter in the South is definitely appealing. There's been quite a few days where I have not had my heat on during the day, which is wonderful. But so I took out the pansies that I had in the pots and put the pots away in the garage, but I put the pansies in the ground, and they're so happy. And they're more like the little viola pansies. So they've got these cheerful little faces and purple and yellow and white and pink, and they're just out there being happy. And like, that's the richness of life right now. And, you know, me digging under the crepe myrtles and seeing the earthworms and such things. And I will close because I have to go. We're doing Qigong before the actual gong ceremony, so I have to go pick up a friend and go to my Sufi fairy godmother's house. But we went on a little hike the other day, again after the rain, all this water, and there's a little falls, and I knew it would be pretty. It was dry all autumn, and so it would have been dried up, but it's a beautiful pool. It's in Lake Catherine State Park. And, you know, and my friend Pilar, she's 81 and she's awesome. And she's got her big Christmas sweater on, and we're hiking, and like, it got a little scrambly, but like climbing up rocks, like, she was awesome. And so, and we went, and on the way, she had a friend who was reading her a poem that he had written. And it was all inspirational about like the beauty of nature being a reflection of your soul. And so we're hearing this on the way to the park, and we get to this beautiful pool with the falls coming down, and I'm looking, and the rocks, and I see one, and I'm looking because it has like some slash marks on it, and I'm like, I think it says God. And then I'm like, or maybe joy. It's either joy or God, but it's one or the other, or maybe both. And then she looked, she says, I think I said fish. So I guess that's the richness of life in this 3D timing reality that we are in. And although I would not necessarily have chosen how this all happened, I feel really, really blessed and grateful for the generous people of Hot Springs, Arkansas, and vicinity, all of the people who have been drawn here by the resonating quartz and their hearts. And again, thank you, folks, for people who have sent things my way, including seeds and flutes and in this little book. I mean, just think about like samadhi and the reduced heart rate, and like all the animals in their winter sleep being in touch with the divine at a different level. Like, that's pretty cool, including the fireflies. Like, that's really awesome. So anyway, I wish you all beauty and wonder and richness for the new year. And I'll be uploading this probably on New Year's Day, since I have to go now. But it was good hanging out with you. And again, many, many blessings.